Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory Ukraine, where during the previous 48 hours both the Russians and the Ukrainians were attacking each other using hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. I would like to remind you that yesterday the Russians carried out one of the biggest attacks on the capital of Ukraine, the city of Kyiv. Lots of videos were published on this matter. Lots of destructions the Russians managed to deal as a result of this massive attack, and according to information we have, the Russians managed to destroy a lot of military facilities that the Ukrainians were using to produce drones, and lots of videos were published on this matter. And this attack once again took place between the 14th and the 15th of June of 2026. Probably a day after the Ukrainians carried out a retaliatory strike, and the Ukrainians attacked probably for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation the capital of the Russian Federation, the city of Moscow. No, the city of Moscow, the Ukrainians this wasn't the first attack in the direction of the city of Moscow, but this was the first massive attack in the direction of the city of Moscow that brought the results to the Ukrainians. And during the previous night and this morning we received lots of videos on this matter. We saw hundreds of drones flying over the city of Moscow and attacking different objects of military and fuel infrastructure of the Russian Federation. And the question is why the Russians and the Ukrainians decided to attack each other during these days between the 14th and the 16th of June of 2026. And the answer to this question is simple. The thing is that today the G7 summit begins, and during this morning and during the 16th of June of 2026 we have already received lots of videos on this matter. For example, in this video we can see Donald Trump, Zelenskyy and Macron that have arrived for the G7 meeting. Most likely during these summits they will talk a lot, and probably they will talk a lot about the conflict on the territory Ukraine. Most likely the Ukrainians and Zelenskyy will receive additional support from the Western countries. Another important thing is the statement that was made by the President Trump. Right now, I'm focusing on Ukraine. We had good conversations with Zelenskyy and Putin. The United States will focus on Ukraine after the conflict with Iran is resolved. And the thing is that most likely Zelenskyy will receive support from the President of the United States of America. Most likely Zelenskyy will receive additional weapons. Another important thing is that today, according to information we have, the Ukrainians will discuss the US accession. Today we opened the first cluster of European Union accession negotiations. This is a huge step forward. Ukraine has made remarkable reform progress. They have delivered, so now we have to deliver too. So as you can see today, the Western countries, the European Union, the NATO organization, the United States of America will discuss with the Ukrainians military and financial support. And this is the reason why the Russians yesterday carried out the biggest attack on the capital of Ukraine, the city of Kyiv. And the yesterday's attack was something like a message that it doesn't matter for the Russians who support Ukraine, the Russians will continue the special military operation until the Russians achieve the goals of this special military operation. And the Ukrainians attacked the territory of Russia between the 15th and the 16th of June of 2026 using hundreds of drones, and that was also something like a message to the Russians that the Ukrainians will continue showing resistance despite the pressure from the Russian side. Now let's return back to the Ukraine's massive attack. Once again, during the previous night, the Ukrainians were using hundreds of drones to attack the territory of Russia, and according to updates we have, the Ukrainians were mainly attacking the capital of the Russian Federation, the city of Moscow. Another important thing and a very important difference is that the Russians were attacking the city of Kyiv during the night. So when people were sleeping, when there were no people on the streets, or the number of people on the street was very small, but in comparison with the Ukrainian attack, we see that the Ukrainians were attacking during the day period of time, which means that people were on their works, people were on their way to works, and which means that with these drones and with these attacks, there could be casualties, significant number of casualties, first of all, among civilians. And according to information we have, the Ukrainians were trying to attack just several objects on the territory of the city of Moscow, and the most important target for the Ukrainians was the Moscow oil refinery. And in this video we can see exactly the moment when the Ukrainians attacked this Moscow oil refinery, and according to videos we have, according to media, the Ukrainians managed to deal probably significant damage to this object of fuel infrastructure. So here we have the consequences of attack. Pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Ukrainians attacked basically the heart of the Moscow oil refinery, but these statements were made by pro-Ukrainian sources, so very difficult to say whether we can trust these statements or not. But even from this angle, from this perspective, we see that indeed some facility on the territory of this oil refinery was significantly badly damaged, and probably it will take time before the Russians are able to stabilize the situation and to restore this Moscow's fuel refinery at full capacity. And once again, this attack, as you can see, take place during the G7 summit and during the US accession summit, which means that Zelenskyy was trying to send a strong message to Russians and a strong message to the European countries and to the NATO organizations that Ukraine doesn't afraid of Russia and that Ukraine must be a part of both NATO and the European Union. But this is the message that the Ukrainians sent, and probably due to this massive attack, we should expect that during the 16th and the 17th of June of 2026, so during the upcoming night, the Russians will attack the territory of Ukraine once again using hundreds of drones. As of the previous nights, the Russians also attacked the territory of Ukraine, and the Minister of Defense of Ukraine stated that during the 15th, between the 15th and the 16th of June of 2026, the Russians used 134 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine. Not the biggest number, just a regular, let's say, overnight attack without significant consequences or without significant damage that the Russians could deal. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous 12 hours, we received lots of interesting updates. First of all, the Russians continue their Sumy offensive operation, and during the previous day, additional changes were recorded through the settlement of Kondratovka. According to different sources, the Russians improved their positions through the central part of the settlement, and the Russians continue advancing further in the western direction. It seems that in coming days, the Russians will announce complete control over the territory. This is a very important village that opens the Russians the logistics towards the settlement of Khotin from the north. We Russians right now are tasked to establish a very powerful and strong foothold to the north of the city of Sumy by taking under complete control everything to the north of these red lines. So this is a primary target for Russians, and now they invest lots of resources with the purpose to finish this operation. Now let's move and let's discuss the situation in the Kharkiv direction. We have lots of changes. Now probably nobody has doubts that the city of Kharkiv is a primary target for Russians. During the previous days, the Russians continued bombing and attacking the city with drones and with missiles. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Russian sources published several videos of how they were attacking headquarters on the territory of the city and how the Russians were dealing significant damage to the city and to its objects of logistical infrastructure. And during the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. And today we have first proof that confirms the Russian presence on the territory of the city of Kazachi Lopan. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. So this is the end of the 15th of June and this is the beginning of the 16th of June of 2026. The Russians improved their positions through the northern parts of the city of Kazachi Lopan, and we have first proofs that indeed the Russians managed to answer the settlement and to dig in deeper. The Ukrainians continue sending more and more forces in the direction of the city of Kazachi Lopan with the purpose to stabilize the situation and not to lose control over this important city. The Russians discovered the troops of the armed forces of Ukraine and attacked them immediately with aviation and with bombs. The Russians continue advancing through the settlement of Kazachi Lopan, and something tells me that the Ukrainians will not be able to hold their positions for a very long period of time. The Ukrainians will try to hold their positions for as long as possible these days with the purpose not to lose control over the the territories during the G7 summit and the European accession summit, but right after these summits end, the Russians most likely will be able to improve their positions and the Ukrainians would retreat towards more reliable positions. As for the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region, it seems that the Russians began their major offensive operation in the southern direction, and these are the changes on the ground between the days. According to information we have, the Russians began offensive operation using broad frontline attack in the southern direction towards the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz. Telling the truth, I didn't expect that the Russians would begin their offensive operation like this, because there is a very big gap between the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz and the river of Volcha. There are just fields, no buildings, no villages, which means that the Russians may suffer huge losses while moving through these, let's say, tree lines and fields under the pressure and fire of FPV drone operators of the armored forces of Ukraine. But for some reason, the Russians decided to begin moving, which means that in coming days the Russians will continue shortening the distance toward the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz until they get the city itself. At the same time, the Russians most likely will continue their pressure through the western parts of the settlement and through the western flank between the settlements of Shesterivka and Losivka. Several pro-Ukrainian sources reported that these days the Ukrainians began their counter-offensive operation in this area with the purpose to cut the salient, to cut this pocket, but as of the morning of the 16th of June of 2026, we haven't received anything that can confirm this counter-offensive operation from the Ukrainian side. Now let's talk about the Kupiansk direction. Another day and another batch of changes we received. So this is the end, for example, this is the situation by the end of the 14th of June of 2026. This is the situation by the end of the 15th of June of 2026. During the previous day, we received a video where we can see lots of, probably dozens or hundreds of flags through the Kupiansk direction. Here we have Russian soldiers that were raising their flags in different parts of the settlements of Kovsharovka, Kupiansk, Uzlavoy, and Glushkovka. Lots of episodes, as you can see, were published. And based on this video, yesterday we adjusted the map, and today we receive additional changes on the ground. According to different sources, the Russians are about to finish the battle for the settlement of Kupiansk-Uzlavoy. Probably the Ukrainians still control some micro-districts or some blocks of the settlement, but obviously in coming days, the Ukrainians will lose complete control over the Kupiansk-Uzlavoy, and the battle most likely will continue moving further in the western direction. Probably in coming weeks, the Russians will establish complete control not just over the eastern bank of the river Oskil. Most likely the Russians would try to cross the river itself and to create a strong foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river. And telling the truth, I expect the Izum offensive operation also during the summer military campaign. The Russians most likely would try to encircle the city of Izum from the north and from the south, because as for the southern direction, the battle is about to start. Everything is ready for this. But as for the northern direction, the Russians most likely will begin the Izum offensive operation when they finish with the Borova pocket. And as you might know, currently the group of forces west is focused with the purpose to establish complete control over the Borova pocket. We discussed that up to 30 battalions of the armored forces of Ukraine are blocked in this area. The Ukrainians right now are trying to maintain the corridor for evacuation, but I believe that this is going to be a very difficult task for the Ukrainians to control the pocket and the corridor while they have just one supply line through the city of Oskil and when the Russians have positions around. Now let's discuss the most important direction, the city of Lyman. As you can see, the map has been adjusted significantly. This is the situation by the end of the 14th of June, this is the end of the 15th of June, and this is the beginning of the 16th of June of 2026. The Russians improved their position significantly, and the most important is that we have geolocations confirming that the Russians have strong control over some parts of the settlement. In this video, we can see during the first part a Russian soldier moving through the eastern parts of the settlement, and here we have a Russian soldier raising the flag in the northern parts. So this is exactly the building where the Russian soldier was raising the Russian flag, and based on this video we came to the conclusion that the Russians most likely managed to cut this pocket and to establish complete control along the perimeter of the city of Lyman. We believe that in coming 10 days the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm complete control over the settlement. Who knows, maybe this is going to happen Russian during the G7 summit and the European summit that is also currently taking place today. So the Russians may announce complete control over the city of Lyman even today. And when the Russians finish the battle for Lyman, they will begin the battle for the city of Izum. This is going to be the area of responsibilities of the group of forces west, while the group of forces south will continue offensive operation in the direction of the cities of Konstantinovka and Druzhkivka. And the Russians are doing this right now. As for the Dobropolye direction, small changes were recorded to the north of the settlement of Grishna. Pro-Ukrainian sources published a video of how they were attacking the edge positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation along this tree line and on the territory of this stronghold. The Russians continue approaching towards the small number of villages to the south of the settlement of Dobropolye. So it seems that the battle for these territories is about to start, but this battle will start only when Russians finish the battle for Bilitska. As of the current situation, there are still Ukrainians, and the settlement of Bilitska is probably under complete Ukrainian control. As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours, 12 hours, we haven't received anything special. Only a lot of videos published by pro-Russian sources, how Russians were bombing and attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine through the entire Zaporozhye direction. A lot of videos were published. The Russians are trying to soften defenses of the armored forces of Ukraine before intensifying a ground operation. As for the Crimean front line, during the previous 12 hours, we received a very interesting video published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see how the Ukrainians are trying to establish complete control over the logistic over the northern Crimean canal due to the fact that a lot of bridges were destroyed through the northern parts of Crimea, and through this canal the Russians were forced to change their logistics, and now the Russian vehicles are moving through the settlement of Kalanchak, and the distance to this settlement and to this territory from the city of Kherson is just 66 kilometers, which means that the Ukrainians can use less complex drones to attack this territory, also from the territory of Kherson, which means that the Ukrainians right now are able to establish stronger control over these positions, which means that the logistics crisis and the fuel crisis will only intensify through Crimea. And that's it for the short video. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.